Hello everyone, welcome to Tech Talk Live. This is the latest in our series of technical talks from Alfresco. My name's Will Abson, and I also have with me Nick Birch, who will be giving this particular talk on content transformers and metadata extractors. So firstly, I want to take the opportunity to welcome you all to the session. Nick is quite an expert in this field, so I know he has a lot to say. But just before we start, I just need to let you know that we are recording this session. We will be sending the links out for the recording later on today, in case you can't catch all of it. And if you have any questions, then they are, of course, very welcome. Please type those into the chat panel, and we will put those to Nick either during or at the end of the presentation as appropriate. So I hope you enjoy the talk, and I'll hand over to Nick to start off.
Okay, thanks, Will. We're going to be having a look at two services within Alfresco here, the Metadata Extractor service and the Content Transformer service, and going to be looking at why they can be interesting, what's changed with them recently, and some of the fun things you can do with them. As well as looking at those, we're also going to look at an Apache project called Apache Tikka. Apache Tikka has been around for a few years. I'll go into a bit more detail on it later. But one of the big changes we've had in these two services of late has been around the use of Apache Tikka and some of the things that it's given us. So once we've had a look at the services in general, we can have a look at how we can configure them. And then something that I think a lot of people will be interested in is how you can go about changing some of the metadata that's extracted, how you can go about adding new metadata extractors, and how you can add new content transformers in to support new file formats. So, as I mentioned, these are quite old services. They've both been around since the very early days of Alfresco. And for a long time, not a lot really changed with them. The services were specified, they were defined, they were implemented, several file formats were supported through them, and then they didn't get a lot of attention, didn't get a lot of love. So a lot of people kind of started to forget about them. They were there, they worked for everything that you needed them to do, but there was nothing exciting about them. In Alfresco 3.4, that kind of all changed, and we had a big push to expand them, to add new features, add new formats, especially through the use of Apache Tikka. And we've had a dramatic improvement now in the number of file formats we support, as well as a huge improvement in how easy it is for users and developers out there to go ahead and add new file formats in as they need to. So, Alfresco 3.3, these are the file formats that were supported for metadata extraction and text extraction for indexing. So all the common file formats that you might want. We've got PDF, we've got some of the Microsoft file formats, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, the open document formats, a little bit of email, and that's it. So they were the core ones that have been present in the repository in the system for quite a long time. But you'll notice it fits onto a slide with a bit of space around it. So it wasn't a very large number. Then with Alfresco 3.4, when that came out about a year ago, we'd added Apache Tikka support, gave us a big improvement, and since then we've continued to work with the Tikka community to add additional file formats, and the effects have been fairly dramatic, as we can hopefully see from the following few slides. So, supported formats. We now support various audio formats. We've got WAV, RIF, MIDI. We've got some CAD formats around DWG and PRT. EPUB for ebooks, RSS and Atom. TrueType fonts, proper support for HTML. Lots of images are now supported. We've got JPEG, GIF, PNG, TIFF, bitmap. And for those image formats where there is Exif data embedded in the image, we're able to pull that one out and map it. And I've got a demo for that a little bit later on. So this is one slide so far. Slide number 2, onto the Office formats. We now support the iWorks format, so we've got keynote, pages and numbers for metadata and text extraction for indexing. Got RFC 822, not 833, mbox mail. We've got Microsoft Outlook email, and then on the Microsoft Office itself format, for the binary, the old style ones, we've got Word, we've got PowerPoint, Excel, Visio, Publisher Works, and then we've also got support in for the new OXML file format, so Word, DocX, PowerPoint, PPTX, and Excel, XLSX, so they're all in there. Moving on, we have another slide. We've got some audio formats, some scientific formats, and finally we now support various archive formats, XML, video, and so on. So there's been a fairly big change there. We've gone from a small number of core formats to a plethora of formats out there, covering not only the core business things, but also quite a lot of media-related formats, music, video, that kind of thing. So all of a sudden, there's a lot more interest around these services because people have realized what we can do. And it was very interesting when we added some of the image formats. I went ahead and added it. Everyone in engineering thought this was a good, solid piece of functionality to add in. And then we did a demo for some of the support engineers, and they were ecstatic. And some of the cool demos that they knocked up in a few hours on top of that, it was really good, and it was really nice to see the power you can get with these now that we've made it easy. So I mentioned Apache Tikka a few times now. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's an Apache project. It's been around since 2006, which has a few different capabilities that are all related to working with content, getting data out of content. So originally it came out of the Lucene project, so you can see the indexing and text pedigree there. And one of the things it supports is detection capabilities. So you can go to Tikka and go, I've got this blob of data and I'm not entirely sure what it is. Can you figure it out for me? And Tikka can go away and look at it and go, hey, that's actually a Word document there. You've just lost the file extension there. So it can figure that out. And then it has these parsers that work with a wide range of file formats that pull out textual information and metadata. And one of the great things for users of Tikka is it hides all of the complexity of the file formats and the libraries for working with those file formats from you. And you can just go to Tikka and go, here's a file, figure out what it is, give me the metadata, and Tikka then goes off and handles that for you. And you don't need to know how to read a PDF, you don't need to know how to read a Word document, it's all handled for you. So within Alfresco, that's wonderful because as users of Alfresco, people go, here's a document, I need you to look after it for me. We can then go to Tikka and say, can you give us the metadata from it? Tikka can extract the metadata, we can store it, and then it's available to the user immediately. So it's very powerful and very helpful for us. And the text extraction, it gives quite rich text extraction, so that then gets used in the indexing process within Alfresco, so that you can do powerful queries on that as well. So back into the Alfresco layer, the metadata extractor service is there to extract metadata from files uploaded into the repository. And as part of extracting that metadata, turn it into something that can be used within the content model. So for example, you can upload a Word document, and the Word document has metadata on it, such as the title and description that's set, and then the metadata extractor service can pull that out through the use of Tikka in this case, and map that onto CM title and CM description, so that that information is immediately available to you to work with. The metadata extractor service has a number of different extractors available to it. Most of the ones out of the box delegate down to Apache Tikka, but by no means all, and they don't have to. And you can go to the service and go, I've got this piece of content, can you please try and give me metadata? And it will then find the appropriate extractor for you, extract the content, and then apply the rules you've specified for how to map that onto your content model. So two common areas for extension are adding new extractors, but much more commonly just changing those properties and how they're mapped, which is done with either a Spring context file change or a properties file change, and you can just define the extra properties you want mapped onto your content model, and then immediately they'll, for new content, you'll see that go through. Content Transformer service is one that you will knowingly use a lot more. It's the one that transforms content from one format to another. So, for example, turn this Word document into plain text for indexing. Turn this Word document into a PDF for web download. Turn this PDF into a SWF so I can get a nice web preview. Turn this big image into a small image so that I can see it for a thumbnail. It has a large number of different transformers internally. Some of those are Java-based, some of them are external processes. So, for example, most of the image-related ones are done by calling out to ImageMagick, which is a command line tool. And it makes heavy use now of Tikka for the text-based extractions, and then a lot of command line tools for things around images and video and so on. So, has anyone got any questions on that before we dive into some specifics?
There is one question here so far, Nick. You mentioned that Exif data was supported for different image formats. What fields are supported for that Exif data, and is that flexible?
Yes. I'm actually going to do a demo a little bit later on, which will show the ones available by default. So that's probably the best way for me to let everyone see that rather than talking through the content model. But what there is now a out-of-the-box Alfresco content model for dealing with Exif that handles most of the common bits of Exif data, and then Tikka itself extracts a wide range of Exif information. But if you find that the bit of Exif that's interesting to you isn't handled, you can define your own aspect which holds those extra few bits of Exif data, and then you can update the mapping properties and tell the metadata extractor that an extra piece of information coming from Tikka should be mapped onto your aspect, and then you'll get that extra bit of metadata. We've tried to cover all of the common bits of Exif that we think anyone would want, but the Exif spec is a few hundred pages, and we picked the 20 or so common ones, so it's certainly possible there's a few others out there. But thanks to aspects and the properties mapping, you can very easily add in some extra ones if needed.
Okay, thank you. If the person who asked that question, I think it was really over the flexibility of that, so I think that should answer that, but if not, then please let us know.
Yeah, once you've seen the demo, give us a shout if there's any more questions then. It's probably the easiest way. Okay, let's look a bit more detail. So, to get metadata extracted, the most common way that this happens is when people upload content into Share, and it runs off in the background and does the extraction. There is an action available. So sometimes if you're working with content yourself in your own code and you perform some operations on it and you then need to have the metadata extracted, the action's there. Or it's very simple to do it with some Java code. So there's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of Java code there on the screen if you're interested. So that's mostly going to be for people who are doing their own coding and playing around with the content properties directly. If you're just using something like Shared, then it should all happen for you automatically. The metadata extractors, there's a registry of them, and one's kept per MIME type, and then for each extractor there's a properties file, or you can do it in Spring, setting the properties, that controls the mapping from what the extractor produces onto your content model. So if you added a new bit of the content model and you needed to say, when the created date is extracted, I need that to also go onto my new aspect. You'd update the properties file and list it in there. If there's interest at the end, I can show some examples if we've got time. One thing that is relatively new is the MIME type info web script, which I'm going to demo a little bit later on, and that lets you see what extractor, if any, is available for a particular MIME type. So if you knew you needed to change the mapping for metadata coming out of the DWG file type, you can have a look in the web script to see that DWG is handled by the DWG metadata extractor, and then you know it's the properties of that class there that you need to go and alter. If you have Tikka paths that use the Tikka plugin interface, if you just drop them into your class path, then Alfresco will detect that and register it with the Tikka auto parser. So if you write your own Tikka plugin, which we'll touch on briefly a bit later on, you can just drop it into Alfresco, restart your repo, and it'll immediately be registered and available, and you can use the MIME type info web script to see that and make sure it's all behaving. So for a little bit of an example, here we've got the new geo content model that came in 3.4. It's very simple. Aspect contains simply a latitude and a longitude. Nice and simple. Then Tikka is able to extract out geographic information from, I think it's about half a dozen different file formats that support it. So what we have in the mapping file for the Tikka metadata extractor that handles this, we have a mapping for it. So the way it works is, on the left we have the keys that are emitted by the metadata extractor, and on the right we have the short form of the properties that we want that mapped onto, and we define our prefixes and namespaces in the usual way. So if you look at 3.3, for example, you'd see something like author equals CM author, title equals CM title, and that would be it. Now we've added the geo support and we've got the content model for it, we can add these two extra lines in saying that key geo : lat, the escape there is to make sure that the properties file knows that it's the equals to split on, otherwise you end up trying to map geo onto lat equals, and that's not really what you want. So if you see a key called geolat coming out of your extractor, pop that onto the CM latitude property, which we saw was defined on the aspect. And that's then all we need to do to map these extra properties onto our new aspect. So we're now, hopefully, the demo gods are with us, going to see what happens with a geotagged image. So let's give this one a whirl and see if the demo gods are shining on me. So we're in share here. Go into our document library. And this geotags file here is one I uploaded earlier. And there's two things to note here. We've got these two little icons that are showing up in 4.0 now. So the first one is telling us that there's Exif metadata available for this file, and the second one, that little map pin, is showing us that the geolocation metadata is available. So when we uploaded this file, the extraction happened, the aspects were applied, the Exif aspect was applied, and the geo aspect was applied automatically because the properties were found, and then Share is able to then show us with these nice little icons that information is available. Now, if
you might want to, sorry to interrupt, you might want to just talk through the tooltips there. I think it's a glitch in the software. They're not actually showing up what the text is on the tooltip.
Okay, so the top one, just tooltip, says Exif metadata available, and the little Google marker pin says geolocation metadata available. I'm not going to go into how you get those to show up if you've got your own custom aspect, but if you come along to DevCon, the UI team will be talking about that. So it's quite interesting, because if you have your own custom aspects, your own custom metadata being extracted, you can then get this to show up. And if we go and have a look at our sample file, our duck swimming on a lake, and we scroll down to the properties, you'll hopefully see there's a lot more properties present than you might have expected from a sort of 3.3 install. So we're on 4.0 now, and we've got the Exif information. And about halfway down the list, we start seeing a lot of the Exif information. So we've got the width and the height are available. We've got the exposure time and the f-stop number, which I believe is something about the lens used, but I'm not a digital camera nut, so unfortunately I can't tell you in detail. We can see the ISO speed, we can see which camera it was taken from, we can see which file, we can see that it was Photoshop that was used to alter it, and then down at the bottom we can see our latitude and longitude, which are available there as well, having been extracted. So that's all there, that's all available to us. And all we had to do was upload this file with Exif information on it, and that was pulled out and that's available. There are some good demos if you look around for how you can take several pieces of content that are geotagged and map them onto a Google map. And I've got a feeling that it's going to be in someone's DevCon talk, is showing how you can do a custom share view that uses this geotagging information and gives you a nice little view on where all your photos came from. So that's enough of the duck swimming on a lake. So have we got any questions on the metadata, any questions on the Exif now you've seen the duck?
Nothing else at the moment, Nick. I'd carry on and we can pick up questions at the end.
Okay.
As they come through.
So content transformers. Again, as with metadata, there's a registry of these that can be picked up as needed. And you can have more than one transformer registered for a given pair of MIME types, and then the best one can be picked. And you can have simple direct transformers from A to B, run this command, execute this class, we're done. Or you can have chains of them where you say, in order to get from a plain text to a web preview, what I need you to do is I need you to call that transformer there to make a PDF, and then that transformer there to turn the PDF into a SWF file that can be shown in the browser. The transformers are always defined with a from MIME type and a to MIME type. So from text plain to application PDF. And if you want to know what ones are currently available, the MIME type info web script will tell you all you need. And again, as with metadata, if you've got a new Tikka parser, you can just drop it onto the class path and Alfresco will pick it up. One query we get a lot for especially images and video is if you need to do a transformation that's not possible in Java, it can only be done by a command line tool you've got. How do you configure that up? And it's actually relatively straightforward. You define a transformer, which is the bit at the bottom, and you say this is going to work on an executable command, and then the bit at the top we specify what command to run and what MIME types to use. And then when Alfresco sees you wanting to go, in this case, from text plain to the made-up MIME type of hello world, it will go and run the command we specified, capture the output. So if you have some special piece of video encoding software that you've licensed from someone, and that's going to let you turn your your standard piece of video into something optimized for your client's special kind of mobile phone, you can define a transformer that will call out to that specific piece of software, do the transformation, store the resulting version that you can then feed out. So it offers a great deal of flexibility and a great deal of power. So you're not only restricted to the pure Java solutions, you can go off and do whatever you want, but the slight downside is when you're calling these external programs, you have to do more of the work yourself. You'll actually have to go and find out what are the appropriate command line arguments to specify to make the tool do what I want, and drop that in your Spring context, and then you'll be away. Any questions on that bit? If not, I'll show you briefly the MIME type info that I've mentioned a couple of times. So this web script is available in the repo tier, and it's a fairly long list by default, which has got all the MIME types but with the information hidden. And if we're interested in a particular MIME type, in this case the DWG format, which is a CAD format, we can request the details, and we can see that there is a metadata extractor available for DWG. We can turn a DWG file into XHTML, XML, HTML, and plain text, and we can see what transformer will do that. And we can also see that you can't make a DWG file in Alfresco out of the box. You can only upload them. If we were to go and look at one of the CSV, there's no extractors available for CSV, unfortunately, because there's no standard way of storing metadata in CSV. We can see that we can make a CSV file from an Excel file, or this other one, which is an XLSX, the new Microsoft format. So the two Microsoft Excel file formats can be turned into a CSV. And we can also see that there's a whole range of file formats that we can make from a CSV. So we can do a plain text version, or because we can do a plain text can be used to make a PDF. So we can get a PDF, and then onwards from there we can make a JPEG file or a PNG file. So we're able to do thumbnails of CSV files by transforming our way through. So it's very easy to come and have a look at this and see what's going on. The other thing to note with this is it's giving you a live view. I've got a slide on this a little bit later, but while I've got this up, I'll mention it. So if you have more than one transformer available for a given file format, and one of them is an external process and it falls over, you can look at this page and see immediately what's currently going to be used. So a lot of the transformations to PDF from Office formats are done with OpenOffice. So if you're on Community and you haven't got JOD converter to babysit it, and your OpenOffice process falls over, you can go and have a look here and see that it's no longer going via OpenOffice, and then know that the reason why some of your transformations have vanished is because OpenOffice has fallen over. So it's a very handy way to see what's actually going on with these two services. So transformations available in Alfresco 4.0 out of the box. Basically anything that Tikka supports getting the text out of, we can give you a plain text or an HTML version of. It's about 30 file formats that Tikka is able to get meaningful text from. PDFs we can turn into images and SWFs, so we can use them for thumbnailing preview. The various Office file formats we can turn into a PDF through OpenOffice. Plain text and XML we can make PDFs of. We can do zip listings. We can do various image transformations. And one thing to note is that if you have ffmpeg installed on your machine, there are two sample context files in the extension folder. And if you remove the sample extension from them and specify where to find ffmpeg, you can then get video transformations and video thumbnailing. Because of licensing and patent reasons, we can't ship a copy of ffmpeg with the installer. So as end users, you'll have to go away, read the license, and then if you're happy with that, you can download a copy of ffmpeg, tell Alfresco where you put it, turn those sample files into real files, and then you'll get video transformations and video thumbnailing, and that's available. The context files, I think, were in 3.4 as examples. And as I mentioned before, you can chain them together to get more complex transformations if needed. Mostly covered this little bit already. So there's a registry of them. You can have more than one, and it will pick the best one available. Oh, skip too far. This is our little example Commandline Transformer. And now for another little demo, we can have a look at video thumbnailing. So for my Alfresco install, I have downloaded a copy of ffmpeg, and I have uncommented those two sample files and put them live. And the effect is that when I uploaded an image file earlier in Blue Peter style, for those of you from the UK, that's the right kind of age, it was able to thumbnail it. So in my document library, down here we've got the video file that I've uploaded, and you'll see here a nice little thumbnail which is taken from the first frame in the file. That's configurable. If you have a look at the sample context file, you'll see all the ffmpeg options, and you can pick the one that's appropriate for you for your needs. And then when we have a look at the document details, we again see a larger thumbnail of the first frame. So if you do have a lot of videos in your repository, it's worth having a look at this, worth checking out if you can use ffmpeg, and then enable it if you can. And then you get the video transformations that can make a real difference to users. Different demo, one for more business users than the video, is what we've got here. This little snippet of JavaScript is showing how to use the transformation action to turn an Excel file into plain text, which is what gets used for indexing, turn it into a CSV, which can be handy for passing off to a lot of legacy style systems, and also generate an HTML for web preview. So what I've done is I've put this script into the data dictionary, and then I've set up a rule in Share to fire that off. So hopping back to my demo site, I've got this folder here called Convert Excel, and for those of you who've not seen it before, that little forky arrow thing is telling us that we have rules defined on this folder. So if we see in the rules very briefly, this Convert Excel rule, and it's saying if it's an Excel file, execute my Excel to many script that I've just shown you. So what we can do is copy this Excel file into this folder with the rule on it. And now when we look in that folder, the script is fired, and rather than seeing just the one sampled XLS file, we can see CSV, we can see a plain text, we can see an XML. And if you look at, for example, the plain text, we get a preview. That's been done by an additional content transformer. So we turn the Excel into a plain text, store that as a new node, and then when we ask for a preview, that's then translated into a SWF file automatically by Share, so that you can see in your browser what's in that file. And then if we look at the XML, which is an HTML basically, you can see that we have relatively clean HTML coming out for that. I won't zoom in on it because it's not that exciting anyway, but it's available there. It's been able to transform it automatically into HTML, so if you wanted to do some sort of preview, you could do. The production of HTML is particularly interesting to people who've got Word documents and who are using the Web Quick Start, which I think was Brian's talk last month. We've got a rendition defined in Web Quick Start as standard, which uses Tikka to take Word documents and produce a simple, clean set of HTML for them, with an idea that you can upload a Word document, and rather than what would happen in the past, where you'd have to cut and paste that content from Word into the editor and then tweak it and edit it and publish it, that first step of the copy and paste we can automate for you through the use of Tikka. And it will produce, it's not going to look anything like what your file did before. We strip out all of the formatting, all of the styles and everything like that because you want clean HTML, but you've then got that information available to you, and also we'll extract any embedded images at the same time and make those available. So I'm hopefully going to have a demo of that in my DevCon talk, just so you can see how you can chain this all together and use it for, in that case, how to do Word documents to clean HTML, to edit, to publish, and that's all possible using these. So let's move on a little bit more. Anyone got any questions on the content transformers?
There's one question here, Nick, on the ffmpeg, which is, would ffmpeg support a custom transformation from MPEG 4 to WebM, or anything else that would do that?
I think it depends on the options when you build ffmpeg. So ffmpeg has a large number of formats it can support, but it has dependencies, and if those dependencies aren't there when you build it, then you won't get them. But I believe you can do WebM if you've got the right things when you're building it. So if you're not going to be building it by hand, you just need to have a look at the file formats that were compiled into it. One good thing about ffmpeg is you can ask it what file formats it supports, and it prints out a matrix effectively, and for each particular format it says I can encode to this or I can decode from this. So you can download a copy of the internet and then ask it what it supports and see if it's got the formats you need. One other thing to note is the registration of ffmpeg into Alfresco is effectively a manual process. So for each format you wish to support, there needs to be a definition in the context file. So if there is a new format you want supporting, just have a look at the example context file and just copy and paste an entry for the appropriate format with the appropriate options. Unfortunately, it's not yet possible for us to query ffmpeg and find out exactly what formats it supports and do that on the fly. It would be nice to have, but one issue is that ffmpeg describes some of the formats differently to everything else. So while in Alfresco you'd say, oh, that's a video WebM file, ffmpeg has a slightly different name for it. So we'd also, not only would you have to query ffmpeg, but you have to manually figure out what a file is called in ffmpeg to make it available. So it's a little bit of fiddling around with the context file to set it up, but once it's there, it should just work for you.
Okay, it's possibly also worth mentioning as well. I just thought while you were saying there that if people have problems with some videos not getting converted when they've turned on those sample files, and maybe others do, that could perhaps indicate that that particular format of file isn't supported by the version of ffmpeg you've got.
Yep. you give me 10 secs, I'll just check what the option is. Yeah, if you run ffmpeg with the option -formats, it will print out a list of everything it supports. So that's the quick way to check, and then you can just have a look through, and it will tell you about them, and you can look and see whether the ones you need are supported by the copy you've got.
Okay, great.
All right. Tikka plugins, mentioned Tikka a few times. Out of the box with Tikka, there are a large number of file formats that are supported, and all of the libraries that Tikka depends on out of the box are either Apache licensed or very similar liberal licenses like that, so you don't have to worry at all about any licensing problems with using them. But there are file formats out there that are only supported by proprietary libraries or GPL libraries. Tikka, being an Apache project, won't ship out of the box parsers that depend on proprietary libraries or GPL libraries, but it does provide a plugin mechanism that allows you to register new ones. If you were to go and write or download a Tikka plugin that was GPL'd, you can just drop that on the class path and Alfresco will detect it and use it. There's a list of third-party plugins on the Tikka wiki. Currently there aren't that many of them because we've been quite good of late of converting plugins that were available only under the GPL and coming up with an Apache licensed one so it can work out of the box. But the plugin interface is available, so if you were to go and write your own one, so let's say you have your own in-house Java library for working with a file format that's completely specific to your company, and you want to get text indexing of it going in Alfresco, probably the simplest way is to write your own Tikka plugin, drop your Java library and the Tikka plugin on the Alfresco class path, and see it appear. So in order to write a Tikka plugin, there are only two methods you have to implement. Get supported types, which is a method which returns the list of the MIME types that your plugin can handle. So that's the way the auto detection works. Tikka says, oh hello, nice Mr. New Plugin. What file formats can you help me out with? And your plugin says, oh, I can help with this file format. And then Tikka and Alfresco register that. And then when that file format comes along, it knows to go and ask your plugin to help. And then the other method you need is the parse method, which does the actual work of grabbing the text and the metadata. And then there is a service file that you put in your jar that tells Tikka that the class exists. So one option is that you put in that service file, Tikka will detect it and everything will work automatically through the auto plugins. Or if you want more control over it, for example, if you've got some special custom mappings that you need to apply to the content transformation, you can define a bean which is the wonderfully and mouthful titled Tikka Spring Configured Content Transformer or Tikka Spring Configured Metadata Extractor. And with that, just give it the name of the Tikka parser you've got. It will then wrap that up in an explicit transformer or an explicit metadata extractor. And then if it was a metadata extractor, you can then define the properties that do the mapping. If you're interested in doing that, if you have a look on my Alfresco blog, which we're going to pop in the chat any second now, Maxine's just finding it in the list. I did a few blog posts around this time last year on the very topic of how do I add custom Tikka parsers to Alfresco, not using the auto-detect mechanism, but using explicit registration, and how do I then go about setting up the mapping rules for it. And so if you read through those 3 blog posts, they'll talk you through the whole process. So If you need explicit control and a lot of detailed control over what's going on, you want to go down the route of the Tikka Spring configured. And that's also all documented on the wiki. But if you need the narrative and the explanation of what's going on, have a look at the blog. If you just want to know the details, no faff, no pros, just have a look on the wiki. So you've got those two options for adding your own plugins. So let's have a look at a Hello World Tikka plugin. And as you can see, it does fit on a page. There really isn't a lot to do here. So this Tikka parser is going to handle the made-up MIME type of hello/world, and it's going to output a bit of text saying hello world. It's going to output a couple of bits of metadata, and it's outputting some custom metadata. So if we were to be wiring this into Alfresco, we could have a properties file that says map from the property custom one onto my aspects : my property, and then that'll get mapped through onto your custom aspect, and it'll be available to you there. So they're very simple things to write. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on how to register them. I'm not going to do any demos now on actually using them. If you want, I am going to include that in my DevCon talk. So if you're going to come along to DevCons in either San Diego or London, they'll have a few more demos involved in them. Got a bit more time to prepare for those, so they're going to have some quite cool demos. So we'll actually get to see there how to use the Commandline Transformers and how to use these Tikka plugins, get them automatically registered, do some round tripping on the transformations. But if you guys want to try that, most of the information you'll need is on the wiki. So, got a few minutes left before we turn into a pumpkin for any last questions. So if anyone has any questions around Tikka, around content transformers, or around metadata extractors, now's your chance.
Okay, Nick. I've got another question here, probably going back to the beginning of your presentation.
Yep.
You mentioned CAD drawings in DWG.
Yep.
The answer is probably yes, but this question is AutoCAD metadata extraction supported as part of that?
I think AutoCAD uses the DWG file format. We can pull out some metadata. There is a slight issue, which is that the file format is proprietary and AutoCAD won't tell us exactly what the file format should look like. So the support in Tikka has been written off the back of staring at hex dumps of the file format. So we can get out title, description, author, creator dat, and a few other bits like that, because they're very easy to spot in a hex dump because you know what you typed into AutoCAD and you can see them. But some of the fine-grained custom metadata we don't currently support because no one's figured out where in the file that actually lives. So the common stuff is there, yes, but some of the really specific bits aren't. And unfortunately, unless we can get AutoCAD to release the final file format specs, that's all we can do.
Okay. There's another question, which is the Apple Office Suite supported? And I think you covered that as well. So that's supported
yeah.
in 4.0.
It is supported for metadata and it's supported for text extraction, but it's not currently supported for things like make me a PDF. And that's because we don't have any programs that can render them cross-platform. I think there is some work going on around that with what's called Project Polymorph, which is one of our partners whose name I've forgotten. Can you remember it, Will?
I'm just looking that up now.
But one of our partners have developed a series of transformers that you can license, that basically they have a separate virtual machine that runs with a copy of Windows on, and then that has things like Word, Excel, PowerPoint themselves running with various scripting controls on them, and that then allows the Alfresco can then talk to that system and say, please ask the real copy of PowerPoint to make me a PDF of this, and it goes off and scripts PowerPoint to do it. And I think they've got some stuff around the Apple formats there, but at the moment, without supporting OpenOffice for them, and without Apple providing a library for them, we can only do the text extraction. We can't, unfortunately, do anything fancy. But they do sometimes include a thumbnail. So I believe we've got some support for showing the thumbnail for them, because iWorks generates a thumbnail and chucks it in the file, so that's there. But what we can't do is render it.
Okay, great. I think we've got a few questions on formats in general. You mentioned audio formats as well. What, which audio formats are supported for metadata extraction?
We support things like WAV and MIDI for some basic extraction, but the main two would be, actually main three are MP3, OGG Vorbis, and FLAC. And for those, we're able to extract quite a lot of detailed metadata, things like the sample rate, the number of channels, the artist, the artist title, album year. Unfortunately, there isn't a content model for those out of the box. It narrowly missed being in 4.0. So that information is extracted but then thrown away. So if someone wanted to write their own content model, they could tweak the extractor mapping properties and have those properties mapped onto their content model. Otherwise, hopefully, we'll manage to sneak that content model into 4.1. So it will be a little bit of a wait, but eventually we should have that out of the box as well. For these, the easiest way to find out what metadata is available on a file is to use Tikka itself. So Tikka ships, as well as with the libraries, it also has a command line tool. It's very handy for debugging. It's just a single jar file that you can run. It has all the dependencies included. So if you run that against a particular file you're interested in, with the metadata flag, it will print out all the metadata available in that file. So you can have a look and see what metadata is there, and then you can set up the mapping rules to turn that into your content model.
Okay. Just thinking on that, the music example you mentioned there, it sounds like a really easy win for someone in the community if they need something like that. It's pretty easy to do that, right? You just would need to define that custom action and then the mappings, the custom aspect, sorry, and then the mappings to pull that information out of the files and persist it. And
ideally also some forms config so that you can edit it later.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
For the Exif stuff, there's forms config that exposes it all and lets you edit that. So yeah, if someone in the community would like to write that, then that'd be great. Send in a contribution and we'd love to get it in. Otherwise, hopefully one of the engineers can find a few minutes to do that when no one's looking and sneak it in.
And would that support, would Tikka support things like cover art as well? You mentioned that the CAD format supported thumbnails, but obviously in music files you've got cover art as well.
It's an open enhancement request on Tikka to extract it, so it's not supported yet, but there's a few people who've been talking about it, so I'm hopeful that someone in the Tikka community will go ahead and add that in the not too distant future. And one of the great things about us using Tikka is that when someone in the Tikka community adds a new file format, they contribute a new file format, all we have to do is pull in the latest Tikka jar, just run some tests to make sure there's been no regressions, and we get that new feature effectively for free. So sooner or later someone will add that feature in, and we'll get it in Alfresco shortly afterwards.
Okay, great. I think that's it for the questions. So I don't see any others coming through right now. Okay. Well, thank you, Nick, for speaking and giving those demos.
Thanks.
We will have another Tech Talk Live, hopefully scheduled in sort of in between the DevCons. It's obviously going to be a busy time though, so we will post an update on that on the events page on the Alfresco website. Obviously, as Nick mentioned, there's a lot going on at DevCon as well, so it's certainly worth looking at that if you're not already attending. And if we don't see you then, we hope to see you on the next Tech Talk Live.